In tonight's Political Insider, CPAC 2014, the Conservative Political Action Conference is now underway at the National Harbor. What's on the agenda? Joining me tonight with a breakdown is Samantha Lachman, reporter for the Huffington Post. Samantha, today was the first day of the conference with some stand-up jokes from Senator Mitch McConnell. Give us a recap.
Yeah, I mean, it was a day of heavy hitters. You had Senator Ted Cruz, you had Senator Marco Rubio, you had Governor Bobby Jindal and Governor Chris Christie. So there's a lot of, big names in the Republican Party coming out to prove their conservative credentials, to reach out to the grassroots and to their base, for people to network with each other, for people to learn about, new organizations in the conservative movement. So it was definitely a big day that started off with Senator Ted Cruz and kept on going from there. One of my favorite parts was Senator Mitch McConnell, who's facing a Tea Party challenger from the right, walking out onto stage holding a gun above his head, presenting an award to Senator Coburn, who is retiring this year. So, he is showing that he, has been characterized as an establishment candidate, but that actually he has those conservative credentials and is trying to make a name for himself as that this year with a national audience.
Now, this is a crucial time for the Republican Party. Many have said they lack leadership. Can we expect to see a unifying message during the conference?
Well, I think you saw all of the different speakers offering sort of different visions for the party, and yet at the same time it wasn't a conference about soul searching. It wasn't a party saying, why did we, sort of lose ground in 2012. It was much more so, evaluating these different leaders, talking about who could be, a potential leader for the party in 2016, and those, leaders offering different visions. You had Senator Ted Cruz, who was talking about repealing the Affordable Care Act still. Where
we see Marco Rubio now. What did he say?
Marco Rubio was sort of talking about more of a foreign policy, the foreign policy aspects of his candidacy, and criticizing President Obama on Ukraine. So that was also a different aspect of his potential leadership for the party that was analyzed at the conference.
Now, Chris Christie was invited this year. In 2012, he angered some conservatives by embracing President Obama over Hurricane Sandy. Did Christie's Bridgegate scandal help or hurt him with fellow Republicans this time?
It's a really fascinating question. I think you had some in the Republican Party who actually came to Governor Christie's defense, given that they feel that he's been unfairly attacked by Democrats. And you saw Christie in his speech, really talking about his relationship with unions, which we could definitely say is not good, talking about, his stances on abortion as an anti-abortion leader of a state that is definitely more progressive and blue on other issues. So we saw him sort of touting those more conservative presidential, credentials, like more conservative aspects of his record, trying to ingratiate himself again with the party and be seen as, a candidate that has a shot in 2016.
How big of a role will the Tea Party play in this year's conference?
Well, I think that for that we really, have to look to Saturday, the day in which the attendees will vote in a straw poll about who who their favorite leader of the Republican Party is. And at that point, we'll have more insight into who, they sort of see as being the future for their movement within the Republican, in contrast to the Republican establishment. So it'll be interesting to see who wins that. You have former Governor Sarah Palin, who's speaking on Saturday, who's, always a favorite of the conservative establishment. So we've really seen, the Tea Party muscling into the movement, and perhaps there's not even really a bright line between the Tea Party and the conservative movement at this point, as we see at this conference.
All right, Samantha, let's work beyond the 2014 midterms. How are some lawmakers positioning themselves for 2016?
Well, as we talked about, you saw Senator Rubio talking about his foreign policy credentials, criticizing President Obama on Ukraine. We saw Governor Christie talking about his conservative record and sort of making the case that he could be someone who, is able to win in a state like New Jersey and yet at the same time shares things in common with the conservative movement. We saw Governor Bobby Jindal trying to make a name for himself and not just be the governor of Louisiana, but someone who could have national aspirations. We saw Senator Ted Cruz, who got, sort of the biggest cheers of the conference when he talked about not compromising conservative principles on the debt ceiling, not compromising on the budget, not compromising on the Affordable Care Act. So, at this point, we saw them all making moves to sort of define themselves within the movement and to show that they could be the best possible leader.
Before you go, what do you make of Rick Perry? He thinks his star is rising again, but people have a long memory. The way he kind of messed up at the last debates. Do you think there's any place for Rick Perry?
It's possible. Former Governor Perry is speaking tomorrow, so we'll see what he has to say at that time. But I think people remember him as being sort of inarticulate, perhaps not the best in debates, forgetting, his messaging, forgetting his talking points. So it'll be interesting to see if he comes across as someone who's a little bit more polished, who, has a future beyond just being governor of Texas. And so we'll see tomorrow.
It's great getting your insights. Samantha Lachman, writer for the Huffington Post. Thanks, Samantha.
Thanks for having me.
All right.